Yeah, I know that this question looks kind of scary, but try to reassure yourself that we're in the early part of the section. So question 4 is supposed to still be easy. So it may look intimidating, but try the things that you would normally try, and you might surprise yourself, and it might not be as bad as you think, even if you've never seen imaginary numbers before. There is one rule that I'll have you memorize that will help for these in the future, but let's see if we can figure it out without it. So what would I do if I was just ignoring this kind of crazy thing here and just pretending that I was a variable? Well, I'd probably want to get rid of those parentheses. And so for 5 plus 12i, I can just drop the parentheses entirely because there's nothing being multiplied. It's just 5 plus 12i. Now for the other piece, though, we have a potential problem, right? We know that we need to distribute, so that negative needs to get into both parts. So negative 9i squared isn't too bad, but many people forget that the negative times the negative 6i is going to get us a plus 6i. Now again, just following normal algebra rules here, I would want to combine like terms. So that's a 6i and a 12i. So 5 plus 18i minus 9i squared. And now you might be stuck because you're like, okay, well, I don't know what happens here, but I don't have an answer. But look, if you're just kind of trusting the process a little bit here, we have a plus 18i, and only one answer has a plus 18i. So if I were just guessing randomly at this stage, I would be like, okay, let's pick D. And if that's the best you can do, that's fine, because it's going to get you the right answer. That is the answer. But there is a way to get this by proving it, and it's not much harder. Here's the rule that you need to memorize. They tell you that I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So what a lot of people do is they substitute that in. Bad idea. That rule is not actually helpful on the SAT. The more important rule that they don't tell you is what I squared is equal to. Now think about it. If we had the square root of negative 1 and we squared it, it would cancel out the square root. So the rule that is much more important for us that they don't tell us is that I squared is equal to negative 1. That's the substitution that we need to make. So now if I plug that in here, what happens? I have 5 plus 18i minus 9, and I'm not going to skip a step here. I'm just genuinely going to put negative 1 in for I squared. And then I can multiply and say, okay, what happens when I multiply negative 9 times negative 1? Well, it's going to switch the sign. So some of you can do that in your head. That's fine. But I'm a little nervous because if I look at the choices, everything happens to be, the difference between a positive and a negative. So I don't want to lose a negative. So don't skip that step. So now we've got 5 plus 18i plus 9. And once again, we have some like terms that we can combine. And that gets us 14 plus 18i, which was the answer we thought. So there is one other type of imaginary numbers question that can come up on the SAT that's very difficult. You would see it near the end of a section. I'm not going to get into it, but most of the time that these come up, you can pretty much just treat I as if it were a variable and just kind of do the normal algebra stuff that you would do. And then if you have an I squared, you substitute in negative 1. And then everything else, again, follows the normal algebra rules. So these should not scare you just because it might be something you haven't seen in school yet. It's not that bad. Especially if it's near the beginning or middle of a section, it's usually just about knowing this one rule that's in light blue. So try to commit that to memory. It's absolutely worth it because it could get you 10 points that are not that hard to get if you know this one thing. And then obviously know some algebra along with it. So try to memorize that. It's really, really important.